Hello and welcome, and this is Peter, and the very first thing I'd like to do in this audio is say thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate you, so thank you for listening. In this audio, I'm going to explain to you something called a distinction. What is a distinction? Now, in the world of landmark education, one of the things that we do is we clearly define what it is that we're talking about. And we have clear definitions of words because clear definition of words is important. Altering the definition of words over time is something that people use to control populations. So within landmark education, we're kind of, and I'm not a representative in any way, right? I don't get any money from them. I just recommend their stuff because they've got the best stuff out there. Just in terms of full disclosure, I've never been an employee. I've never been paid 1 cent by Landmark Education. I have paid them plenty of money over the years for their training courses, and they've been great, right? And I recommend them, and I don't get a commission on selling them, on promoting them. So, distinctions in landmark education, we're really clear on what a distinction is because people get confused between what's true and what's a distinction. So you can go on to YouTube or even on my website and type Werner Erhard, and or just go onto my website and type Werner, and you'll come up with audio tapes that Werner did in the 80s, right? And one of the things that Werner will say in public for everybody to hear is, I don't want you to think of what I say as being true. And if you're feeling, and he was talking to an audience, if you're sitting in the chair wondering if what I'm saying is true, let me relieve you of that burden and say to you that you should not consider anything that I say to be true. And you should not be concerned as to whether it is true, right? So one of the things that I want to teach you very, 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 very early on in this process, like the first audio, is you should not take anything that I say about landmark education and the distinctions that we use, etc. You should not take these things as true, and you should not put the burden on yourself of saying, is what is Peter saying true or false? Okay, because if you spend time thinking about, is what Peter's saying true or false, that you won't actually be listening to what I'm saying. You'll be listening to the voice in the back of your head, which we'll talk about it in an audio called Always Listening. And you should not be concerned about, is this true? The always listening. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. If you're wondering, is what I'm saying true? Your little voice in your head, which we call the always listening, that will be talking to you, and you'll miss what I'm saying because you'll be having the conversation with that little voice in your head, right? So a distinction, when we say distinction, or when I say distinction, I don't mean something that's true, okay? I'm not saying ABC, this is true. I'm saying ABC, just consider that it's possible, right? Consider that ABC is possible. Not necessarily true, but consider that it is possible, and consider that you might consider that it's true, right? And then if you consider that it's true or consider that it's useful, and you find conflicting experience, then consider that it's false. Be your choice. You have a choice in choosing whether you believe something to be true or false, right? So that's what I want you to do. I want you to understand right up front that what I'm telling you, you should not consider to be true unless I'm asserting that something is true. Like when I'm asserting about an experience, I'm asserting that experience is true. That experience happened. But when I'm asserting about a distinction and I'm asserting about what's possible in the future, I'm not telling you something that's true. I'm telling you something that you could consider as a possibility. And we'll get into possibility later, right? So a distinction is a way of looking at something to create a useful construct that supports future way of being, future action, that sort of thing. So it's a distinction by necessity is an invented concept. It's a concept brought into consciousness to create something that's useful further down the track. Not necessarily true or false, but useful, right? Now, I'll give you an example of a distinction because most people have never thought about this. It's never crossed their mind because most people like to think in terms of true or false and right and wrong and stuff like that. It's very common for people to try and establish the truth of a conversation or the truth of a matter. It's very common for people to try and establish whether something is right or whether something is wrong or whether something is true or whether something is false. That's very common. Now, even though we invest so much time and effort in doing that, are we any better off? Are we more successful when we do that? And the answer is often not so much. Sometimes we are. Sometimes establishing the truth of a matter is important, has effects, and sometimes it doesn't. But we spend much more time trying to establish the veracity of a situation than it delivers benefit to us. And that's quite common amongst people. So, just fiddling with the door here. So, we're in a situation. So, a distinction is an invented concept, neither true nor false, just useful for doing something else, right? And for being the basis of something else. So I'll give you an example. If I said to you, 2 plus 2 equals 4, is that true or false? Well, you'd say that's true, right? Because you learned at school that 2 plus 2 equaled 4, and you were told that's true, right? But if I said 2 plus 2, what is 2 plus 2 if we're using the base 3 as our numbering system? Is it 4? And the answer is no, it's not 4, it's 11. 2 plus 2 in base 3 is 11, right? Oh, you might say, okay, well, yes. If I say 2 plus 2, what's 2 plus 2 in base 3? Well, that's 11, okay? Not 4. Or 2 plus 2 in binary. What is it in binary? It's not 4, because 4 doesn't exist in binary. So suddenly we see that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is only what we would consider true within the context of the base 10 numbering system, right? Isn't that interesting? The truth of the matter relies on the context in which it's being talked about. How about that? Now, 2 plus 2 equals 4 true? Well, the answer to that actually turns out to be no. It's not true as such. How did it come to be considered true? Well, a long time ago, the Arabs tried to come up with a better numbering system than what the Romans had. Now, we all know Roman numerals, right? And one of the difficulties in Roman numerals was the math. Doing math in Roman numerals was not so easy. And the Arabs came up with another numbering system that we use today that was easier to do math with than Roman numerals, right? The numbering system we see today. So as the numbering system we see today, is it true? Does 2 have a truth to it? And the answer to that is really no. 2, the number 2, was assigned to have a abstract representation of something out in the real world. Okay? The idea, the concept, the distinction called 2 was created as an abstraction to point to something in the real world, that it was useful to manipulate the abstraction rather than manipulate the real world object. Okay? So let's have some examples. If I have 2 apples and 2 more apples, and I say 2 plus 2 equals 4, because I now have 4 apples, is that true or false? And the answer is, well, really, it's not true nor false. Yes, I've got 2 apples, and I've got 2 more apples, and I put them together. Now I have 4 of these fruits called apples, but hey, if you go to another country, they're not called apples, they're called something else, right? So the idea that 2 apples plus 2 apples equals 4 apples remains dependent on the context in which you are talking about it. They're not called apples in Chinese, and 4 is not the number in Chinese, for example. Now, if I have 2 apples and 2 oranges, and I say 2 plus 2 equals 4, I've got 4. Is that true? Well, if you stop and think about it, I don't have 4 of the same things now. I have some apples and I have some oranges. So to say I've got 4 of something, I don't really have 4 apples or 4 oranges. I have 2 apples and 2 oranges. So I have to create another name to apply to this to have 4. And what I call them is fruit. So I have 4 pieces of fruit, but 2 apples and 2 oranges, right? And this only actually makes sense in the English language. And in the other languages, it's different, right? So you can see, but in other languages, the language and the expression, the artificial construct which was invented to communicate the concept of what's happening out in the real world, those words are different. And if I'm talking to a Chinese person and tell them 2 apples plus 2 oranges is 4 pieces of fruit, that Chinese person has no idea what I just said, because they don't speak English, they speak Chinese, right? So I have the situation where in the real world, I have 2 apples, I have 2 oranges, but in the abstract world, called the English language, which is a description and representation of the real world, these things only have meaning in that abstraction. And if I talk to a person who doesn't understand those abstractions, but does understand the real world and has another abstraction of language called, say, Chinese, then they can express what's happening out in the real world in their set of abstractions, right? So fairly soon you begin to understand that our different languages, our different number systems and things like that are in fact abstractions which were invented to describe the real world so that we can communicate about the real world and then perhaps do something a little bit more useful in the real world. Okay? But it's not true or false. It's just a distinction, a human invented abstraction to describe something else out in the real world such that we can work with it more effectively. Okay? That's what a distinction is. Now, I'll build on this a little bit. Okay? So for most of human history, we did not have the ability to build tall buildings, right? For most of human history. For most of human history, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have flowing water in the house, we didn't have sewage in the house, like a toilet, an inside toilet. That's a relatively recent invention. We didn't have cable, we didn't have TVs, we didn't have internet. For the vast majority of human history, we didn't have all these really cool, neat things that we do today, like have tall buildings kitted out with electricity, gas, heating, whatever, cable TV, cable internet, indoor running water, hot and cold running water, all these things that we take for granted today and go, hey, this is pretty comfortable, right? As opposed to living in a cave. We didn't have all those things, right? So how did we come to have those things? What was necessary to build the knowledge and the ability to have these very complex ecosystems that we build around ourselves to live in. What was necessary? Okay, so what was necessary was we were able to build upon our basic math, like the numbers. We were able to build such things as calculus and other models of math that represented things out in the real world, such that we could figure out how we might manipulate these things in the real world with some safety. So, for example, when I was at school, I did engineering sciences, just a couple of years of engineering sciences. And one of the things you have to do is work out the stress in trusses, in roofs, right? Because if you're going to put a roof over a building, you better make sure that roof doesn't cave in and fall down on the people below, right? And there's a set of math that defines that you can use to calculate the stresses at the stress points in trusses on top of houses and buildings and things like that. So there's an enormous amount of math in understanding the stresses in a building, and then the strength of, say, tensile steel being put into the building and steel poles and things like that. There's an enormous amount of math in all that. But all that math are distinctions. They're inventions. They're not true or false. They're just a way of using abstractions and inventing more and more and more abstractions that express what will happen in the real world if you set up a set of things together, right? That's the power of distinctions. The power of distinctions is they're not true nor false. They will tell you what's going to happen or be predictive of what's going to happen out in the real world based on the experience that you've built up for these distinctions, right? And because we have this ability to create these distinctions, particularly around the engineering sciences, we now have the ability to build ourselves relatively safe and relatively comfortable places to live, such that we are now, the most cosseted, taken care of creatures on the planet. Apart from pet dogs or pet cats, we've got it pretty good, right? That was all built up from distinctions. And it took many thousands of years to build up this experience and build up these distinctions to the point where we're at today, where literally the total sum of human knowledge is available to us on our laptop, on our tablet, via the internet, in the comfort of our own home, right? You can literally today access, if you want, the entire history of accumulated human knowledge from the comfort of your own lounge room, right? And what do we do with it? We take selfies and post selfies on Facebook, okay? Literally, we waste our technological capability that badly. But you can see what I'm getting at. You can see that over millennia, distinctions were created that were neither true nor false. They were just useful in getting to the next level of constructing things that were useful out in the real world. That's what we use our mathematics for. Most people, when they get in their car and they drive it down the road, they have no idea of the complexities of engineering and math that took place to create that car. Right? They've got literally no idea of how the car came into being over the centuries, all the different modes of transport, and all the time and all the effort and all the investment that many men put in to create this car. Most people, when they get in their car, start it up and drive wherever they're driving, have no appreciation at all of what went into giving them the ability to do that. Okay? No appreciation at all. Excuse me. So what I'm going to teach you in this journey is like the set of distinctions that will take you from today. If you're, let's say, a walking pedestrian today in the area of business intelligence sales, like you're at the level where you would you'd call yourself a caveman. You're a cave dweller in the business intelligence space. You're a pedestrian in the business intelligence space. For you to go out and get a deal, you're a bit like a caveman who's got his spear or whatever, or his bow and arrow. He's got to go out into the forest and chase down a rabbit or something else like that and shoot it and kill it and clean it and bring it home and eat it, right? You may be kind of at that level of business intelligence sales, the caveman level. Or you might be better than that, right? You might be in a better position than that. These distinctions that I'm going to teach you are a little bit like the math. As math is to engineering and building, this stuff is to business intelligence sales, right? So we used to live in caves. We used to live in single-story dwellings. We used to walk everywhere. We used to have to go to the well to get water and all the rest of it. Now we live in accommodation where literally we have hot and cold running water in our apartments or our houses. We have cable, we have electricity, we have gas, we have cooling, we have heating. We have the total sum of the accumulated knowledge of humanity available to us on our tablet, and we watch cats on YouTube, right? So math and the distinctions in construction and electricity and engineering and all that sort of stuff has developed over the last 3,000 years such that we can now build a very, very nice environment for us to live in. And yet, smart people like me fail at selling for years and years. And we did not have a way of most assuredly taking an individual and training them from wherever they are today into a proficient salesman. We didn't have that. One of the things that you have through these distinctions that I'll talk about is you have that. You have the distinctions of landmark actually work with anything. But in this case, I'm applying it to business intelligence sales, right? So these distinctions will take you from pedestrian, cave dweller, hunter-gatherer with rabbits or whatever, that level of ability to go out and get sales, right up to super salesman level, right? The difference between living in a cave and living in a luxury apartment. With these kinds of distinctions that you'll be able to go out into the marketplace, survey the marketplace, as long as you've got a good product to sell, go out to the marketplace, survey the marketplace, and literally go out and make a killing, right? Literally, go out and make a killing. It's the difference between using bows and arrows to go get your customers to using, a pot of honey to attract the bees. Okay, you will go from chasing down deals to having deals come to you and being pretty much given to you. Okay, and I'll use an example just to close out this audio about distinctions. I'll give you an example. And this is from 2000, right? Back in 2000. So most of you will know Qantas because it's the Australian national airline, and we advertise overseas, obviously, and our planes fly everywhere. So most of you will know that Qantas is the national airline of Australia. Fairly big organisation, obviously, and they have a cargo division. And one day I'm sitting in my desk, and when I was working at Ardent, I'm sitting at my desk, and I get a call from Qantas saying, "Hey, are you Peter Nolan? I got your number from reception." And I went, "Yeah, I'm Peter Nolan. Who are you?" Let's call him Fred. "I'm Fred from Qantas Cargo, and I'd like to talk to you, please." And I say, "Have you talked to your account manager? Does your account manager know about this?" And he goes, No. I don't know who our account manager is. I'm catching you. He said, "Well, look, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. Love to have a meeting with you. But, of course, I got to bring my account manager. If you haven't spoken to your account manager, I got to bring my account manager with me because you're Qantas. and the account manager should know everything that goes on over in the account." He goes, "Yeah, sure, yeah." So I said, "Look, can you give me a couple of alternative times, and I'll check with the account manager, and we'll get back to you with one of your alternative times. He goes, yeah, sure. So anyhow, the meeting takes place, and the meeting is described as we're looking at a data warehousing project for Qantas Cargo, and your name has come up within this discussion, and we want to talk with you about what your company can do for this Qantas Cargo data warehouse. I'm like, yeah, okay. So we have this conversation back and forth, etc. He's like, okay, great. And, we have a couple of meetings over a couple of weeks. And then they say, okay, well, we've got an RFP. So we've got to put an RFP out to the marketplace. And we've got 4 companies we're giving the RFP to. So off you go. And so we answer the RFP, etc., and we put it back in. And then we're going through the sales process of the RFP. And yeah, sure, they're trying to push us on rates and all the rest of it. So we had this negotiation process and blah, blah, blah. And then we get to the end of it, and they say, yes, you've been awarded this RFP. Okay, great, I win. And then we go in, and one of the things that you're taught at IBM as a youngster is whenever you win a deal, you ask, why did you award us this deal? Why did you award us this sale? We're really interested in understanding that. And you ask the same when you lose. And the guy says, which is why I haven't named him, because I do know he's still out working. He says to me, as we told you during the process, this is I think it was the 4th time round that we're doing this project, and the prior 3 times failed. And either the prior 2 or 3, it's a long time ago, failed. And so I was given this job by my managing director, and he told me, Fred, if you fail on this job, if you fail on this project, don't be expecting to keep this job. Now, whether he was serious or not is a different question. But, Fred was really concerned for his job because the prior 2 or 3 efforts had failed, and, they'd failed for a variety of reasons, and not through lack of ability, because they had good people working on it. And so Fred was pretty concerned. And so what Fred did, what he explained to me was, I called 10 people in the industry that I trust who have data warehouses implemented, and I asked them, I've got a really difficult, complex data warehousing project. Who should I get to do it? Because my job might be on the line. And he said to me, of the 10 people I called, obviously these are colleagues that I trust, because I'm asking their opinion, of the 10 people I called, 6 of them gave me your name, by name, and said, if it's that difficult, if it's that complicated, you should get this guy, Peter Nolan, to do it. And the other 4 all named 4 different people. So you were the only person who got more than 1 mention, and you got 6 out of 10. So, I was pretty convinced. Obviously, we have to find out who you are and find out your experience and what company you're working for, etc. But right from then, I was pretty convinced I was going to hire you for this project, wherever you were. And obviously, you've gone through the process. We have to go through these processes to award contracts. And, you did very well in the processes and deserve this award, the award of this project. But, I was pretty much convinced that I was going to give you this project after those 10 phone calls. And I was like, really? Will you give me the name of the 6 people who gave you my name so I can go buy them a nice dinner? And he went, oh, no, not doing that. Not absolutely not doing that, right? But I said, yeah, well, when you're talking to those people, say thank you very much to them for me. And presumably he did. But here's the difference, right? In the years before that, I was out beating the bushes. I was like the caveman. I was like the hunter-collector. I was out beating the bushes, trying to find a deal. And then when I found a deal, you tried to, the metaphorical, kill it and take it home and eat it, right? So that's what I was doing. And they were small deals like rabbits, right? And here was Qantas This is like Qantas. This is like an elephant coming to the front of your cave and saying, "Hi, eat me," right? "Hi, kill me and eat me." As the metaphor goes, So if you walk down this path with me about distinctions and start learning about these distinctions and taking them on board and making them real for you and using them in the BI sales process, you'll go from the hunter-gatherer pedestrian mode of chasing down rabbits, small deals, to the super luxury mode of having deals walk up to your front door and say, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you, please." That's a very different way of selling, gentlemen. It is a very different way of selling to be running around, trying to find some deals, trying to talk to people, trying to get things moving forward, versus you've built the infrastructure, you've built the team, you've built everything you need, you're doing your advertising, and people are talking in the marketplace and recommending you for work. And then the work just walks up to your front door, right? That is, gentlemen, a very different way of selling. And of course, that's where you want to be. You want to be in the position where people in the marketplace are talking about you in such positive terms that the people who need your sorts of services come up to you and say, "Hey, we've heard about you guys. We've got this project. We want you to sit down and talk to us because you've come to us highly recommended." Very different way of selling. And if you join me on this journey and you go down this path with me, that's where you'll end up, right? Where you will end up if you go down this path with me, as long as you represent a good, solid business intelligence firm, you'll go down the path of people will talk in the marketplace about you and recommend you, and people will come up to you with new deals and say, "This is what I'm thinking of doing. I've heard about you guys. You come highly recommended. Let's talk." Now, sure, they may still have to go through an RFP process. You may still have to prove to them that you can do what it is that you say you can do. And in many large companies like Qantas, the Qantases of the world, of course, there is an audit process that says when handing out deals larger than X dollars, you have to have an RFP and you have to have an independent review of the vendors to make sure that nobody's passing money between companies unjustly, right? So you have to have that. So even though you may be highly recommended, they may really want to do business with you, right? In many cases, particularly the large value cases, you still have to go through the RFP process. You still have to beat the other guys, even though that you may be favored in that process. Favored meaning that you've come to them with a good reputation, right? You still may have to do the RFP. You still may have to beat the other guys. But I can tell you, it's a lot easier to beat them if you're coming in with that sort of reputation. So that, gentlemen, is what a distinction is. A distinction is an abstraction. It's not true. It's not false. It's just an invented abstraction in a certain language that allows you to deal with things more effectively in the real world. The analogy I used is math and construction and engineering, where the math is a distinction for those things. They're not those things, but they're abstractions that make it possible to build what it is that we build. And the distinctions that I'm going to teach you in via the whole landmark thing, and then get onto the sales process, are the distinctions that you need to be able to transform your way of being such that you will be far more effective in the sales situation. Okay? That's kind of how that works. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.